Okay, it's my pleasure welcoming you all once more to the pre-conference Girls Deliver. So my name is Divina, and you will mostly be hearing from Lalita and I throughout the day. So I think throughout this journey, each and every one of us, we need an energizer. And through that, we are going to have a keynote address from an amazing climate activist, Vanessa Nakate. If I can say some few sentences about this amazing activist. She's a climate activist and was appointed UNICEF Godwin Ambassador in 2022. Vanessa began advocating for climate justice in 2019 with a protest on the streets of Kampala, Uganda, becoming a well-known face in the global movement of young people striking for the climate. Vanessa has since used her platform to advocate for climate justice for every community, especially those most affected by the impacts of climate change. She founded Rise Up movement to elevate the voices of African climate activists, as well as a project to install solar panels in rural Ugandan schools. Vanessa is also the author of The Bigger Picture, Manifesto on Inclusive Climate Action. It is my honor to invite you to join me in welcoming this amazing climate activist, Vanessa.
Thank you so much. Distinguished guests, fellow activists, and sisters, I welcome you. I especially welcome the youngest adolescent girls here. You may be used to being called on last to speak, for your time to be cut short, for your words to be ignored. Let today be the opposite of that. Let us create a space at Girls Deliver where the voices of every girl matters. For that is why we are here today. I want us to pause, each and every one of us, and think about what the world would look like if every girl was listened to. If she knew that when she raised her voice to say something that was happening at home that didn't feel right, someone would listen. Someone would take action to protect her. What would the world look like if every girl was given the space, the mentorship, and the skills to pursue her dreams and unlock her talents? Whether that is taking the mic on a stage like this, engineering solutions to the climate crisis, or a journalist speaking truth to power. What would the world look like if every adolescent girl had access to the resources they need? Maybe because they are 19 years old and need some seed money to start a business. Or maybe because they are organizing against child marriage, teenage pregnancy, or any number of crises on the front lines of a climate disaster. I know that we would stand a chance to become the best versions of ourselves. But what is more, I know that the world would stand a better chance, both when it comes to the existential threat of climate change and to becoming a more equal, innovative, powerful, and beautiful place. Each and every one of us deserves that chance. Today, instead, we have an entire generation of girls that is fighting to be free, to build that world, but who are weighed down and held back. Of the 1.1 billion adolescents in the world, around 600 million are girls. At this critical age, girls are falling behind in almost every aspect of their lives. We know the issues, stark rates of teenage pregnancy, sexual violence, child marriage, millions of hours of unpaid care work by girls, and double the number of adolescent girls out of school, employment, or training in comparison with boys. For too long, we've seen investments made in one small part of the problem, smoothing over the complexity of real lives and real needs. Girls do not live single-issue lives. They don't only face violence. They don't only face adolescent motherhood. They don't only face the climate crisis. I want to tell you a story of one young woman that I met when I traveled in Turkana County in Kenya with UNICEF last year. You may know that the Horn of Africa is experiencing the worst drought it has faced in 40 years. The mothers and children are on the front lines of the climate crisis. In Turkana, I met an 18-year-old mother named Dorcas and her 20-month-old baby, Mika. Mika was born malnourished, and Dorcas told me that she had not had enough food to eat to feed Mika since he was born, and tried to explain the pain and stress of not being able to provide your child with something to eat. The drought means that Dorcas has to travel so far to collect water that she must sleep on the way before resuming her journey the next day. But thankfully, with support from UNICEF and their partners, Dorcas is able to visit a nutrition clinic where Mika can be assessed for malnutrition and receive life-saving, ready-to-use therapeutic food. She told me that without this support, baby Mika would not still be with us today. The climate crisis and gender inequality together cut across every part of a girl's life, from nutrition to education to unpaid domestic work like collecting water and childcare. We have to remember that millions of stories lie behind these statistics, and how climate change comes together with gender inequality and poverty to leave girls like Dorcas struggling to make it through the day. As a climate activist, I want to tell you that there is no climate justice without gender justice. Single sector, small scale, and siloed responses are no longer enough. They have never been enough. But we do not need to despair, to sit on our hands and let this situation stand. We need to bring a wholesale transformation of how we respond to these challenges. And this is why I'm so proud to address you as a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador and to launch UNICEF's new Adolescent Girls strategy in Africa today, an agenda developed with and for girls. This sets out the 3 critical changes that are needed to protect and promote the rights of adolescent girls across their lives, from national government programs and systems to international development assistance to support from the private sector. First, multi-sector, large-scale, girl-centered responses are required. Let's get concrete. For example, if a government is running a national cash transfer program for adults, how can that be adapted to reach adolescent girls with the extra support that they need? Second, we must put girls' voices, agency, and leadership at the heart of our work. In the climate movement, I have seen the power of the voices and the stories of different girls from different parts of the world, asking and demanding for a better world for all of us. That's why it's important to have girls' voices in the heart of every conversation and every work that we do. And third, we must get resources to adolescent girls. This approach is already being rolled out by UNICEF in 30 countries in partnership with many others, with the aim to support 20 million girls. But that is a drop in the ocean in comparison to the need. And as important as how we act is the resource needed to act at the scale and the speed required. That is why at this conference, we are calling for $1 billion in new investments from the international community targeted for multi-sector programming with adolescent girls by 2025. We also need a significant increase in public finance committed by national policymakers, an increase that matches the scale of the challenge and of the opportunity that investing in adolescent girls represents. And finally, alongside the investments in programs, services, and systems, we call for a significant increase in resources going to girl-led groups. We are paying attention to history and to evidence. We will not achieve equality without investing in feminist movements and organizers, including girls. I invite you all to think about what our road may be to getting these resources for girls in the coming year. Whether you come here as a feminist activist, a government civil servant, a researcher, or a philanthropist, how can we work together to make this a reality? As I look around the room, I know that with our passion, skills, and the leadership of girls, anything is possible. For too long, girls' rights have been silenced, including in spaces for women and for children, but not today and not by us. When we think about 2025, I invite all of us to envision a world where we have put girls' rights at the center and we feel proud of the changes we have made. Together, I know we can make this happen with and for girls. Thank you.
I was really blown away by your speech. Your work is such an inspiration for all of us youths, and that we are not too young to build the future we want. We are not too young to make demands and live our dreams. Personally, I believe all of us are key stakeholders and that we are capable to drive societal transformation. Once more, thanks so much for your insights. We are now going to invite a truly impressive group of girls and women onto the stage. To jumpstart our day of learning and action, we will have a conversation between 3 generations of gender equality activists. We will listen as they engage with one another. So let me introduce these change makers. The first change maker we have is Stacey Abrams. He's a New York Times best-selling author, entrepreneur, and political leader from the United States of America. She served as minority leader in the Georgia House of Representatives and was the first Black woman to become gubernatorial nominee for a major party in the United States history. Abram has launched multiple non-conflict organizations devoted to democracy, protection, voting rights, and effective public policy. She has also co-founded successful companies, including a financial service firm, an energy infrastructure consulting firm, and the major company Sage Work Production Incorporated. The second change maker we have is Condoleezza Rice Akuwama. She is the co-executive director of Youth for Change and Empowerment, a grassroots youth-led organization in Cameroon which protects the rights of vulnerable girls. She has been instrumental in raising awareness about the challenges adolescent girls face. She's a remarkable adolescent who has made significant contributions to the field of advocacy for young girls, reproductive health, girls' rights and combating rape. She's a Women Deliver 2023 youth advocate, and her efforts have earned her numerous awards. Condoleezza is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in accounting. The next changemaker we have is Kalpa Garg. She's an adolescent leader and a gender activist from India. Her advocacy efforts have been centered around menstrual hygiene awareness, adolescent mental health, and body positivity. Kalpa was selected as one of the 300 Women Deliver young leaders from around the world. She was also one of the Unleashed Global Talent of 2022. Kalpa was the founder and president of the Gender Sensitivity Club and Counseling Cell at her school. She also co-founded an initiative called Flaunt Your Flaws, an annual school-level event and a fundraiser aimed at matching the existing stereotype of beauty. Kalpa is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree from Shriram's College of Commerce. And the last changemaker we have is Malala Yousafzai. She's the co-founder and board chair of Malala Fund. Malala began her campaign for education at the age of 11 when she anonymously blogged for the BBC about life under the Taliban in Pakistan's Swati Valley. Inspired by her father's activism, Malala soon began advocating publicly for girls' education. At the age of 15, she was attacked by the Taliban for speaking out. Malala recovered in the UK and continued her fight for girls. In 2013, she co-founded Malala Fund with her father, Ziauddin. A year later, Malala received the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of her efforts to see every girl's 12 years of free, safe, quality education. Malala is a graduate of Oxford University with a degree in philosophy, politics, and economics. With that said, I call for the attention of each and every one of you to listen to this amazing conversation. Stacey, Condoleezza, Kalpa, and Malala, you guys are welcome to the stage.
So it's very exciting to be with you all here this morning to have this conversation. As the focus, or the main focus of today's event is Adolescent Girls, I'd love that we start off with your reflection on what you think are the role of adolescent girls in leading activism and advocacy, and what you think are the roles of older women and younger women in this young girls' advocacy and activism. Yeah.
I can go first. Yes, I can go first. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be sitting on the stage with incredible women and girls here. I was in Nigeria just a few days ago, spending my birthday with girls from Abuja to Maiduguri, and I had the opportunity to sit down with them, hear their stories of how they are already playing the role of activists in their schools, in their communities. And one story stays in my mind, which was we were in this school, and one girl wanted to read a poem to us, and she wanted to read it off by heart, but she forgot some of the lines. So the organizers were asking her to give the mic back and to say, you know, we are short of time. But that girl refused to give the mic back. She was like, I am going to say this whole poem, no matter what. So she opened the page where she had typed it, and she started from the start and finished her poem. And I stood with her to tell her that I am here for her to finish it. So when I look at the courage and the determination of girls, I am truly inspired. What is the role of the older generation of women who are activists? That is to stand by them and support them. So I've seen in my activism in the past many years that oftentimes girls are made feel that they are less important, that their voices are not as urgent and critical as others. But we need to change that. And I'm lucky that in my own story, when I was only 10 or 11 years old, that's when I started speaking out. I was lucky that I had a father and a family who always believed in my voice. And I remember, like, whenever I would jump in and and say something in the conversation of all the adults with my dad would always like stop. He would go quiet and he would turn towards me to listen to me, and he would tell everybody else as well to listen to me, and that makes such a huge difference. That helps us build that confidence. So when I look at the activism of young girls, I'm inspired, and they are leading movements around the world. But you mentioned the role of the older generation who are doing their activism. I think there could be a lot of support and collaboration there, and we could make sure that we are allies and we are supporting each other. And I think
is to acknowledge that those of us who have been at this work have made mistakes. And I think the first obligation we have is to admit those mistakes and to be honest about how we could have done better, either in the work that we did or the work we didn't do. So often we are focused on the urgency of the issue, we miss the importance of memory. And the importance of memory is that these aren't new issues. Regardless of your religious history, every single historical narrative talks about the oppression of women. It talks about the intent of women being both essential to our survival and incidental to our success. Essential to our survival because we wouldn't be here without us, but incidental in that once our utility has ended, we are then denied the power of our presence. And our memories have to be that what did we try, and not only why didn't we move as far as we wanted, but who stopped us? What stopped us? And so our first responsibility is that of memory. The second, as Malala said, is advocacy. Our voices as we get older, our voices are louder. But sometimes what we should be calling for is the silence of those who would silence others. Like Malala, my father is the first feminist I ever knew. I'm the second of 6 children, one of 4 girls and 2 boys. And my father believed that we were all capable of anything. He used to tell us, never tell yourself no, let someone else do it. I've had a lot of practice at letting other people tell me no. But what that meant is that I grew up with a sense of confidence, but also with someone who would make space for me and would silence those who would silence me. Malala told, I think, an extraordinary story about it, but what it looks like in practice for everyone here is that for every person here who's over the age of 25, I know that you brought someone younger with you. Make certain you do that when you get back to your organizations. You should not enter a conference or a boardroom without bringing young women with you. My first real experience of leadership came when I crashed a board meeting at my college. They were raising my tuition, and this was not a major issue to most, but it was the difference between whether I could stay in college or not. And so I went to the board meeting and I knocked on the big mahogany panel door and demanded that they let me in. And they looked at each other and said, well, we don't have rules that let you in. And I said, well, if the rules don't say I can't come in, then I should be allowed inside. But what I remember about that day was the man who was sitting in that room, who gave me a place beside him, who handed me his folder and walked me through the financial statements. Because not only did I have a place at the table, I then had understanding. And that's the third responsibility. Our obligation is to not simply say we support you, but to invest. And yes, I know I'm talking to a number of funders who have all done really good work. But you can do more. You can invest not only in the proven ideas, but in those nascent ideas, in those imaginings, and those flights of fancy that tell young girls that it's not simply, we are not simply saying we believe we are going to prove it. And if the proof requires that young people, that young women already succeed, then that's not investment. That's simply re-supporting. True investment is when you are an angel, when you come in before the proof is there. And so for all of the funders, all of the advocates, be certain that you are speaking up for these young women and the work they're doing before they can prove that they're right. Help them make that proof possible.
I fully agree with Stacey. mentioned those above 25, so I just turned 26. I'll note down your advice, but I would love to hear from the girls activists here. What are some of the challenges that you are facing in your activism, and what inspires you, what gives you hope despite the difficulties that you face?
Hi, so thank you for the question, Manala. I think it's very important to understand that while girls know what they want and they're advocating for it, when people listen to girls, more often than not, they're like, oh, that girl has potential, that girl is going to do things, but that is where the engagement ends. You appreciate us, but you don't include us. You are right now we're working in silos. Girls are doing their own things. Organizations, while they want to engage girls, but they're not bringing them on the table like Stacey mentioned, and if they do bring them, there's also that lack of understanding and lack of resources that enable girls to be fully invested in what they want, right? So I think that is the key problem that we're facing. And what makes me want to go ahead and what gives me hope every day is looking back and seeing the changes that we've brought. So when I think about impact, I think about people. And thinking about people makes me want to think about how the quality of life has changed before I started advocating for change and now that I see it. And I think bringing that impact even into a single girl's life is very important for me. And that is what gives me hope every day.
Well, one of the major issues that girls in my community face is that of gender inequality. First, I'm from a war zone, and so this gender inequality has led to many other issues. First, we have lack of education for the girl child. Due to the wars, you see finances are limited for parents, and they give priority to the male children, such that at the end you put a female or an adolescent girl and her male counterpart, and she's like 5-6 years behind because the war has been ongoing for 7 years. Another problem, major issue is sexual violence. The war has compounded sexual violence such that you see the main aim of parents now is, okay, let us leave. Like they give very little attention to healthcare and education because it's really bad. And so girls are then exposed to STIs, unwanted pregnancies, unsafe abortions. You even have post-abortion problems and even mental illnesses. Another one is lack of access to sexual and reproductive health services. It still ties to the war because schools have been burned down, health facilities have been burned down, hospitals have been burned down. And even with the limited facilities that are accessible, you find that the personnel are very unfriendly and so judgmental. Like, before you even go to them for advice, you're already, oh my God, they'll say this, they'll say that, and almost everybody knows everybody. And this lack of access to has led to, it also ties with our religious beliefs and our cultural beliefs, because where I come from, the religion is a major thing. And religion does not accept, our religion does not encourage the use of contraceptives and abortions. But at the same time, they don't encourage sex education. So the adolescent girls are just in the middle, we're confused and there's nothing to do. And in fact, you turn left, there's no way, right, there's no way. And so those are the major issues that we face, girls in my community face.
So I do have a follow-up question to your answers. Vanessa already mentioned this, that girls-led movements are actually under-resourced. So I would love to hear from both of you. Imagine there are no financial constraints, and if you have all the financial support that you need, how would you do your activism? And we know that there are a lot of potential donors and supporters here, so don't be shy in what you ask for. So go ahead.
Yes.
I think personally for me, scaling the impact that I'm trying to create. So right now I work at a community level, right? So I started from my school and I impacted a bunch of girls there. So once I've created that impact, once I've if they are able to bring that change in their lives, if their health is improving. So scaling that impact, looking back at whether the activism is actually generating results, and then seeing it from a much larger perspective and being able to reproduce those practices that we have generated at community levels is what I would do if there were no financial barriers for me.
Well, as for me, I have an organization, Youth for Change and Empowerment, and it has a movement, a growing movement. It's called Girl Force. The organization is Youth Force and the movement is Girl Force. And the main aim of this organization is to challenge legal, cultural, and religious barriers that leave the girl child at a disadvantage and encourage gender inequality. So if money was not a problem, the first thing I'll do is to build the capacity of these girls and to build partnerships so that together we can advocate against these bias policies and social norms which leave the girl child at a disadvantage. Another thing I'll do if money was not a problem, we can never underestimate the power of raising awareness. So I'm going to continue the raising awareness to girls in my country, especially in those in the war zone, because they are very vulnerable and exposed. And why not at the national or international level? And then, if money is still not a problem,
We see where the problem is. Okay.
so if money is not a problem, I would love that my organization continues with the direct services. We provide direct services such as counseling, education, and we try to give access as much as we can to sexual and reproductive health services. And so it will really help. And then most of our work now is mostly physical, and we try to make it there. But the vision, another plan that we have is if we can make it digital. Because now with the internet, we have a wider, there are more people, we reach out to more people. Yes, so those are the...
Right, so this question is for Malala. Malala, right now we see that there's an increasing pushback against girls' priorities, whether it be SRHR or education. And so I want to ask you, what, in your opinion, is the reason for the same? Do you think there's a lack of will, a lack of political incentive, maybe a lack of resources that are allocated to girls? And how do you believe that we can bring a change in that?
So when I was in Nigeria last week, I spoke there and I gave a speech with the help of the UN, and it was to mark 10 years of my speech, where I said one child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world, which everybody loved. But 10 years later, I'm looking back and I said, how much have we done for those children? How much have we done for the girls? And when you look at the past 10 years, of course you see some achievements and accomplishment. You look at the inspiring stories of girls and how they have accomplished so much despite the challenges they face. You also look at some of the financial commitments and policy level commitments. The commitment has increased from 9 years to 12 years at the global level. But then on the other hand, there are challenges as well, from the impact of climate change and extreme poverty on education, how we saw the impact of COVID-19 and other external shocks on education. Just to give some examples, the rate of, the number of out-of-school girls is actually increasing in the sub-Saharan Africa, and we also see that, in the rate of the increase in children's enrollment is very slow. So there's still up to 120 million girls who are out of school right now. And when you look at the challenges and why that is the case, yes, there are a few leaders, unfortunately, in the world who don't care about education, who don't care about girls' empowerment, and we see that there is lack of investment, lack of commitment towards that. But then on the other hand, you do meet a lot of leaders who show care for girls, and they are talking about gender equity, and so looking at that, I think that gives you a bit of hope. But we also need to address the bigger problems. We need to look at what is happening with the global financial system and how and I have had many meetings with a lot of these world leaders where you hear some of the challenges, including how the developed countries have reduced their education aid and funding, and they're cutting it down. COVID-19 impacted education, and rather than increasing support for education, we see a cut down in funding for girls' education. And when you look at some of the situation that the developing world is facing, a lot of these low and middle income countries have to decide, they have to choose between paying their debts or paying for education. And in Nigeria, for instance, like more than 90% of the revenue goes to paying the interest on debt. So there are a lot of those challenges as well that we need to address. I think we need to have a more realistic picture of what's happening. But I do believe that we need a global coalition for the empowerment of girls and their education. I think education is the foundation of this conversation of girls' empowerment. So we have to start from there, because if millions of girls are out of school, we may not be able to address all of the challenges that they're facing. So my hope is that there will be more work done for access to girls' education, and I hope that the empowerment of girls becomes a priority for many leaders, that they actually begin by changing policy to then also implementing it.
So I'd like to get your thoughts on about bridging between activism at the national or local levels and that at the global levels. Stacey, most of your work has been within the United States thus far, and so it would be very important that we understand why you thought it would be good to show up at a global conference like Women Deliver, and what you hope to take home from the conference.
She's welcome though.
Thank you for that. So while most of my work has been very much focused in the United States, I actually had my first international trip when I was 22. I was encouraged I had a friend who was very involved in international development, and he and I argued about which was more important, international issues or domestic issues. I grew up in the American South, which is rife with issues of sexual, we have lots of problems. It's a region of the country that grapples with women's poverty, with issues of education, with issues of sexual education. Many of the challenges that are amplified internationally are deeply rooted in this American South. And so I believed at the time that the most important work that I could do was domestic. He argued that I would be better at my domestic work if I had a broader lens. And so my very first trip out of the country was to Austria. I went to Salzburg, Austria, but I was in Salzburg as a fellow studying youth and civic engagement. So I went as a young woman to talk about the civic engagement work I'd been doing in America. I'd been registering people to vote. I was encouraging young people to engage in politics. I was protesting racial violence that had followed the Rodney King beating, and had been working on issues of poverty in the South. And so my roommate in Salzburg was from Colombia. She was part of a group of young women who were organizing around the sexual violence that was being visited upon young women during one of the crises happening in Colombia. And then my other closest friend there was, he'd been a child soldier in Liberia. And he not only had escaped, but he created an underground railroad to help remove some of his friends and allies and help them leave the country and get repatriated in the United States. And so I've never lost that belief that what I do domestically has not only impact globally, but that I learn from global issues how to do what I can, because we are, I mean, it sounds very, very pedestrian, but we are all connected. And when we succeed, when we lift one another, when we are successful in our efforts, then it helps everyone. It was a good thing that we maintained democracy in the United States for a few more years. And it wasn't just about the fact that I didn't care for the current president, it was that the implications of having an American president who was not interested in the obligations that the United States had internationally had implications for the work that each of you do. That when I go and vote in the United States, I am sending a message and a signal that travels far beyond our borders, but also when I am engaged in lifting up the voices of women, when I lift up the voices of people of color, when I fight back against the notion that autocracy and fascism have the right to exist in the 21st century, then I'm speaking not only for the communities I see and serve, but for other communities that may not always have the agency to speak. The other reality is that there's so much to be learned. Sitting here today, what I've learned from all of you, I'm going to take back and view that in the work that I do, because the conversations are so vital, but so are the solutions. I'm going to challenge the two of you, though. You guys get to ask for anything you want, and you ask for just a little more money for the things you're already doing. I want to know, what would you do if you had unlimited resources? Like, close your eyes and imagine, what's the thing that you would do? Would you build a series of health clinics? Would you what would you actually do? Because part of what I try to do in the United States and the organizations I've created, I just make stuff up. I do. I look at the problems, and then I think of what's the wildest solution possible. And then I back into it. I never get the thing I want, but I never stop myself from imagining what is the wildest thing. I live in the deep south in the United States, and I was a black woman who wanted to be governor. It had never happened in the history of our country, still hasn't. But I got closer than anyone else. And when I lost, I thought, I want to guarantee that at least 1 million people of color get to vote who don't think they should. And we got it. And so what is the thing that... And so, Kalpa and Condoleezza, what is that thing that you never say out loud, that it beats in your heart, that you imagine that you want, that you know if you could do this thing, and maybe it's that you'd be empresses of the world, but what's the thing that you would do if resources were completely unlimited?
I would ensure health for all girls. So I'll give you a little context. Right now, I think girls, and not just girls, young people, are constantly fighting this battle throughout their adolescence, wherein they want to have more information about their bodies, about what's going on, and they're not being able to have it because a certain section of older people decided that if they had this information, God knows what will go wrong, right? And this lack of information plus misinformation leads to so many problems that the entire dynamic in their personal and professional life changes, the relationships, everything is screwed up. So if I had all the resources that I would want to bring this change, I would ensure health for all girls and young people. And I think the starting solution for that would be implementation of a comprehensive sexual education within the schools itself, because that is where the
So if there's something that, okay, I never say out loud, but I would love to happen is, first, my country has 10 regions. And I would love to create an impact because there's always a vulnerable adolescent girl somewhere. So what's on my mind is creating, say, centers, like the youth force centers in each region of the country. Yes, and partnering up with, say, a health facility for easy referrals. That's just it. And then, like you and your friend, the international domestic, if I could also have the opportunity to, travel more, to come back and change, yes, my community. Because as I'm here right now, there's a lot that I'm going to take back to the girls I work for, or the girls we work together. So that's another thing. Yes.
Okay, I'll ask you a question. So, Malala, having worked in activism and advocacy at the regional as well as a global level, what do you think are the learnings that local activists can pass on to global activists and vice versa?
I believe in local level advocacy because that's where I started. My father and I were local activists who wanted to speak out about the injustices that women and girls were facing in our hometown in the north of Pakistan. And I would say that it was because of the activism of the civil society that we were able to put a lot of pressure on the government, on the authorities, and on the international community to look at what was happening, how women's rights were completely taken away, girls were banned from going to school. And because of that, the situation changed after 2-3 years, and peace was restored. And after that, it took us a while to have full rehabilitation, but that local activism was really powerful because no one could tell our story better than us. It is true about activism everywhere, in every corner of the world. No one can tell the story better than the people who are affected by the crises, by the issues. And when we talk about girls' issues, it has to be girls who are at the center leading this activism. And no matter where you are, whether you are in Nigeria, Pakistan, Rwanda, US, and Kenya, any part of the world, you find out that you have a lot more in common. And in the end, you realize that there are similar issues that you are facing, such as this lack of financing, there's lack of funding, there are these social norms, and such as there's misogyny, there's patriarchy in your communities. So there's a lot more in common that helps you figure out how to have a collective voice. And so that is the lesson that I have learned, that when we come together, when we bring what we have learned and share it with others and form a coalition, form an alliance, we are helping each other in learning more, but we're also making a collective voice. So my only message would be that, let's appreciate the work that we're all doing individually, but also let's stay as friends and allies, and make sure that we are staying a part of this collective advocacy and voice. So I also have a question, and that is, what role would you like to see adults taking in supporting the advocacy and activism of adolescent girls?
Interesting.
Okay.
So, like you mentioned, I believe that, so there are no specific roles that we want them to take, right? Adolescent girls know what they're doing. They are advocating for change, but more often than not, in my experience, when adolescent girls step into this field of activism and advocacy, they step out of a need of lived experiences, right? There is no specific training or capacity building that happens. So having that guidance throughout their activism, having that catalyst that brings the impact in a much faster manner, and having those relationships around with the organizations and the people and the funders that are required in order to bring that change is where is the role of older people that comes in. Because we could use that help. We want the change, and bringing that quicker is just helpful to the both of us, right? So that is where I see the role of older activists.
So the role, what I see as a role, or what I think should be the role of adults, first is to involve young adolescents in decision-making matters that concern them, or that concern us. Yes, we should be at the table because we are actually, yes, we are the adolescents, we know what they go through. So we should be included, not just as figureheads, but because we have the ideas or the capacity to make that change. And of course, like Kalpa said, the experience. Maybe we don't have the experience, but we hope that you hold our hand so that we can move together to make it a better place. And also, I would like that we destigmatize the topic, let me say sex education. We should destigmatize it such that, everybody is, so that we have open minds. Because I'm saying this because most adults, some of us are parents, let me say fathers and mothers, that we start telling the children, of course at the appropriate age, so that even if they don't have this access, let me say, to sexual and reproductive health services, at least their parents are there for them. Yes. Thank you.
So my question to both of you would be, my mother is a United Methodist minister, both my parents are pastors, and my mom, when she was called into the ministry, women were not accepted. And so she would sometimes go into churches and they wouldn't let her speak. But she created, when she built the church that she led, she actually built a new building, and she included in that building not just the traditional pews and altar, but classrooms and a gym and a kitchen, because she believed that to serve the community we were in, her responsibility was to bring everything together and not simply serve one facet of need, but to serve all. Can you both talk about how important it is for us to take an integrated approach to the issues that you're tackling? And specifically, talk about the issues and why you think it's important for us to have a holistic and integrated approach. I mean, you both have spoken about it. And as Davina's mentioned as well, we have so many different silos. How do we bring things together, and why is that an important lens to have?
So an integrated approach will be very important because all the issues young girls face are interrelated. So you cannot solve one, like Vanessa said in her speech, you cannot tackle one problem and allow the other. For example, we can say, okay, the vision, the aim will be to solve lack of education. But it's not just lack of education we're looking at. You have to look at what led to the lack of education. That could be unwanted, maybe somebody's pregnant, unwanted pregnancy, she's not able to access education. So I think that to get effective and sustainable change, we try to tackle all of the problems, maybe, yes, at a level like gently, but yes, I think we should go with all of them because doing one and allowing the other is not, I don't think will be effective.
I think looking at problems from a lens of life and quality of life is very important because, like Davina mentioned, we don't live part lives. We're not just dealing with one particular problem, right? We're leading whole lives. All of these problems are coming at us at one time. So having an integrated approach really just makes our lives easier. It not only makes the objective that we want to achieve much more whole, but it also enables us to tackle so many problems at one time and enable girls to live a better quality of life by just one policy, right? So keeping that lens every time is important.
So I would like to ask you both, is there a final piece of advice that you'd like to give us as adolescent girl activists? What would that be?
You're closer.
I always tell that girls don't need any advice. They are so determined. And I always tell young people that the determination and the optimism that you have as you get older, don't give up on it. Maintain it, sustain it, still dream big, and we will play our role in ensuring that we actually match the determination that you hold. And to everyone here, I think we would ask rather them to ensure that they match your level of charisma and optimism, and they fund your work, and they also follow your lead. So that is my message.
I would say it to our two young extraordinary leaders and to all of you. We have the right to power. And fundamentally, this is the conversation, this is the battle. Who has the right to hold power? The power to decide your future, the power to succeed, the power to recover from mistakes, the power to create change. And what happens to women as we get older is we become more and more comfortable with someone else borrowing or stealing our power. And if you begin without believing you had the right to it in the first place, it's gone before you're in your 30s. You have the right to power. Everyone say it with me, say power. Power. This is your world, this is your life. You have the right to your power. Own it, use it, and never let anyone take it from you. Hansley's and then Kalpa, tell us what we need to know.
Okay, so value the work of young people. Like Women Deliver has valued me and Kalpa and other young people here. We value the work so that they can feel, I mean, it is very inspiring when you see that your work is being valued, when somebody actually appreciates your work like Women Deliver has done. And another thing too is, let me say, panels or fireside chats like this. I mean, I'm here with Malala and Stacy, and it's just so inspiring because I'm sure there are many other girls that will look at me as an example. And so I'd love that we include young people in the things we do, and that we pay attention and endeavor to help them in their activism.
Right? So believe in us, include us, co-create with us. There needs to be a power shift that happens right now, and the sooner it comes, the better.